Real, raw, and unfiltered rags to riches stories from amazing human beings around the world with emphasis on life, personal development, family, tech, and marketing. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a doozy of an episode again. I'm joined by my special guest, Birgit Yegülalp. Did I pronounce that
Hi.
correctly?
Oh, you did really good, Ivan.
Yes.
Almost. Yeah, it just depends where you come from. I pronounce it as
Yes.
Birgit Yegülalp, but I have to admit, it's a very
Yes.
strange name.
Yes. No, I love it. That's a beautiful name. I
There's
feel
nobody with my name, for sure.
I love it. Well, before we dive into talking about you and your story, I want to preface this real quick and tell viewers and listeners a little bit about you. So you're an upcoming inspiration and motivational speaker, founder and owner of the Cheering with Birgit podcast, offering online training and coaching programs. The show is geared towards empowering people dealing with uncertainty and fear of facing their fears to unlock their potential of living their lives to the fullest. Birgit notes that it is out of their comfort zones that people can gain personal fulfillment and satisfaction. So, uh, I could be wrong here, but I think in part why you started the podcast and what you're doing is because you faced some of these issues in the past, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Basically, everything I build and all the things I share, they come from my personal experience and struggles. And feeling really bad and feeling really anxious for most of my life from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
But all on the other side, I always had this upbeat, positive side that would always win in the end, but I would flip a lot back and forth. So you can, if you are a little bit like that, even then you can imagine that that is very confusing.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me to get that more balanced out, but I really had to go back to the root, because from a very young age I start to go the wrong way, which most
Right.
people would think society would say is the right way, but it was the wrong way, the wrong path for me. And you get so detached, you get so lost in everything that you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
and it actually made me feel anxious and really shit. And I am completely sure, because I met so many people that have the same thing, but they don't have any clue that they are not wrong, that
Yeah.
they're actually right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and before we get to that, because I do want to unpack exactly what you just said right there, I think there's some
Mm.
important elements in that. Let's go way back and start with your childhood, your upbringing. Let's talk a little bit about where you've been, what you've seen.
How long is this podcast again? I sometimes I tell my stories and people like I would start telling stories when I was 32. I'm
Yeah.
36 now, but sometimes I live there and there, and people mostly think I'm much younger, because I was
Okay.
backpacking a couple years ago. I was backpacking amongst early 20ers,
Hmm.
and I would tell stories, and then they're like, "How old are you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm 32." And they're like, "What?" Or 33. And I was hanging out with all these 20, but from the stories, they're like, "You have
Right.
stories for a grandmother, but you look like this. How did that happen?" So, okay, I'll try and be a bit brief, because
Sure.
you cannot say everything. If people want to know more, they can talk to me
Absolutely.
after
Absolutely.
this. Um, well, I am born and raised in the Netherlands, and I have a very interesting background, because my father was an expat. He came from Turkey. He was actually, yeah, he had a career here. He came to the Netherlands for a very good job, and he was in geology and had a PhD. So he was quite of a whiz kid. And he
Hmm.
met my mom in a bar in The Hague, and well,
Right.
this is what
In the
happened
Hague, right?
in The Hague in a bar. It was called the Roaring Twenties. Now, my mom is from the Netherlands. And well, in the end, they ended up marrying, living together, all sorts of things. But my dad was already a bit older than my mom.
Hmm.
But you don't pick that up. I used to go to Turkey like couple times before my 10th and then after, but before you're not that aware that your father is from another country and other people don't understand what he's saying. But
Hmm.
for you, it's just kind of normal. maybe,
Sure.
maybe you can relate a little bit to this story from your own upbringing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, and we moved around a little bit, and my father actually ended up being sent to a pre-pensionated status while he was actually blooming in his career, and that got him quite depressed. You can imagine that has an effect on a teenage girl as well.
Sure,
And I
sure.
was just actually growing up really fast, and I'm a lot like him in a way, so that would get at some clashes. And
Yeah,
that was really hard for me because in one way I'm really tough, and in one way I'm super sensitive. But I didn't understand that I was more sensitive than other people, like highly sensitive,
sure.
because I'm not such a shy person. I'm wild, I go out, and
Right.
so that was not something people would pick up. But I had fights at home, and we were always like things going on, and I just felt it wasn't fair. So I just decided. I remember myself sitting in front of the window, really upset, grounded, and I was like, okay, Birgit, you can't be this sensitive anymore. You cannot keep feeling all these things. It's just gonna kill you.
Right.
And that's a really, really rough thing I said to myself when I was 12, maybe 13. So I forbid myself to be sensitive. And from then on, I decided I was just going to be hardcore, full on, not taking any bullshit from people.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention is you're sharing your story. Well, two things I should say.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is your English is amazing. I know English as a second language is,
Mm.
well, it's tough. I had to learn it. So I know exactly, what it took to get through it. Of course, being much younger, 26 years younger, it's a little bit of a different story because you tend to pick up things a lot quicker when you're younger. And
Mm.
then the second thing I have to say is this is a completely different conversation, but I'm a huge fan of the Netherlands because you have the best trance DJs in the world.
And that's true.
So, and so I've got 10 years of, well, more than that actually, of trance music, and I love Ferry Corsten, Armin, all these guys. I
Mm.
watch it still to this day. So, and the Netherlands actually has one of the best infrastructures in the world from a technology standpoint. I think the world court is still in The Hague, isn't it? Also,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
so anyway, not to interject, talking about
No,
the
that's
Netherlands.
funny. That's okay. That's good because it's. I think it's
Yeah,
good. It's also entertaining for the people that are
yep,
listening or watching this.
yeah. You guys
Yeah,
have,
Netherlands is cool.
yeah. Netherlands is cool. It's
Nowadays, it's very boring. I have to say.
oh, is it mainly because of, I guess, with COVID and all the restrictions?
Oh, it's out of control in my opinion. COVID
Hmm.
not. COVID is fine.
Yeah,
Restrictions. I'm not allowed to go outside after 9 o'clock.
that's a curfew.
We have a curfew, an
Yeah,
illegal curfew, which
yeah.
was actually removed by the Dutch court, and then the government put it back on.
Oh
So,
my
okay,
God.
you cannot even imagine how angry I am with these kind of things because I don't agree with how
Yeah.
things go. So, well, anyway, Netherlands used to
Anyway,
be very liberal, but it's
yeah,
not right now. So, yeah.
not to interject, but I just wanted to mention those tidbits. Please continue because it's really interesting, with your upbringing too. And I want to get to a few points also, but I want to be able to allow you to share a little bit more about your story because I think that where you are today and
Mhm.
what you're doing is largely because of your history and your
Yeah.
upbringing as the things that you experienced at a younger age.
Yeah, definitely. It was very rough. On one side, I had a very happy, nice, caring youth. I did well at school. I
Mhm.
was always one of the youngest kids in the classroom, because my birthday is in August. So if you're like bright enough, big enough, whatever, you can keep going, but you're always the youngest. Parents would treat me like that, but mostly I was far ahead of most kids and I was a lot smarter. So I didn't
Mhm.
really have to do a lot in school. It was very easy for me, which gives you a lot of time to annoy your parents, be bored, play outside. I had a lot of friends and things to do, a million hobbies. I would always have a side job or two or three. So in that way, my upbringing was really nice. But a thing that I decided not to feel anymore. And if you don't acknowledge your feelings and feel your feelings, okay, the happy ones, you let them go through in a way. But if you're not okay with feeling what you're feeling, the intensity of it for sure, you're not letting that really just go through your body because nobody teaches you that. You get taught to think, think.
Right.
Well, that's what they teach you at school. Barely anything creative, and then you have to draw something. It has to be within the lines. You know, especially in that time in the Netherlands, like education was so boring. It was
Right.
just super boring. And I would do music and all these things, but if you don't deal with your feelings, you're gonna find another escape for it, and that's mostly how you get addicted, right?
Yeah.
So I was also quite tall, and I was getting really big, like really beautiful, feminine actually. But my parents would look at me like, "Oh, she's so tall. I have to buy bigger clothes and everything." And my mom didn't know what to do because she would be like a walking stick until she was 16. And when I
Hmm.
was 11, I had to go and buy a bra. And
Yeah.
now looking back and also looking back with my mom, I'm like, Mom, the only thing you had to do is flip the switch. You're buying me your bra, but it
Yeah.
doesn't come up in your mind that you have to take me to the ladies department instead of the kids. Obviously, that's not going to fit if you have curves. So instead of dressing me like a young
Yeah.
woman, actually going to, here they call it high school in the US. I think if you're in first grade, you're in middle
Right.
school or whatever you are, it's called a bit different, but here it's just all high school, like
Hmm.
class 1 till 5 or 6, depends on
Right.
your level. And I was actually very slim, very beautiful, but I just got the feeling that I was fat. So I didn't dare to eat a lot in front of my parents because I would get comments and I was just so bloody hungry because I'm a very
Yeah.
active person. And then what do you do when you don't dare to eat and you're actually feeling really shit? Once your parents are not in your room, you're just gonna hit the cookie jar, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the only food you can get
Yeah.
very quickly without
Right.
anybody seeing it because you're so bloody hungry. And
Yeah.
then that started all integrating into a massive food addiction, especially carbs. And it's
Yeah.
also been proven afterwards that carbs have a sedative effect.
Hmm.
So if you eat a cookie, you feel good about 5 minutes. If you eat a couple of cookies, it sedates your bad feelings. The thing is, afterwards, you're going to feel really
Yeah.
shit because you keep eating the cookies and you're already really full, but you just keep eating. And I would just gain weight. And then I had to go on a diet and gain weight and just lie about what I was eating. And I start
Yeah.
to really, I was getting so deep far into that addiction and hiding, and things were at home were very stressed. So I got a bit of relief when I went
Hmm.
to university when I was 17. I was 1 week 17, and then I went to hotel management school. It's college. It's more of college in the US, I think.
Yeah.
And at least I didn't have that smothering the rules. I had to be early home early than anybody. They couldn't say anything. I was living on my own. I was a student. I could stay out all night. So obviously that's what I did.
Yeah.
But I still passed my studies, my first years, almost no delays, nothing, because I'm actually a person. I take my responsibility. I
Yeah.
didn't need that smothering and controlling. I just wanted to be left alone and just be loved. And don't interfere with me. That's how I am. But it's really hard for a Turkish father. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
hard. It's just like, and he had two older daughters, and he couldn't really raise them. And I have one younger brother, but he was way younger and totally the opposite. And I was the project that really, he just saw everything in me that he actually wanted to have as a child, and he was just
Yeah.
pushing me so hard. So that was good. I was a bit free, and I start feeling better, and that whole relationship got better and became fun again, and we start finding each other back a little bit. And yeah, it was okay, but I
Yeah.
started getting really fat, and I wasn't happy with the way I looked. But then you just go out, you drink alcohol. You can drink alcohol from 16, now from 18 here. So you would
Right.
just drink a lot, especially hotel management school. I was known for being able to drink so much beer. I would win the competitions a couple of years. It's just like crazy stuff Dutch people
That's
do. Yeah.
that's insane amount of alcohol. But I know coming from the Netherlands, you almost
Uh,
have that tolerance, I think, because you grow up in like that kind of I
yeah.
guess a little bit of a party culture in a way, like a very vibrant culture. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah, but the thing is, like you guys learn your children, your kids, they can drive from a really young age that we would never let anybody
yeah,
drive. But okay, you don't drive with a stick, so it's easy, and the
right,
distances are far bigger. Here, you walk somewhere, or you take the push bike. The worst thing that can
yeah,
happen to you is you're drunk, that you fall on the floor or hurt yourself, but that's it. You're probably gonna live. I fell from my bike a couple of times.
yeah,
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 it happens. It happens. So I'm not saying that you should drink a lot, but obviously I partied and it was fine. But it was just the eating was the real problem, and I
yeah,
couldn't really. I would still, like, with the money I had, and go to the supermarket and buy things and binge eat, but that wasn't recognized as an eating disorder back then. You
yeah,
only had bulimia and anorexia. Well, binge eating is the problem, is a big problem. But I was always
yeah,
looking like, what's wrong with me? Why do I have this compulsive behavior? And that went on until for all the years I studied. And then I went to Aruba. I was 20 going on 21. And then I chose to do my whole fourth year, my internship, on Aruba, which is an island in the Dutch Caribbean.
yeah,
So it actually is very popular with American people.
yep,
And in the other island, Dutch islands, most Dutchies come, but there was like mainly American tourism. So
hmm,
it was nice, It felt more like I'm not flying all the way 6 hours that way
sure,
to be surrounded with Dutch people. Most Dutch people were. So I felt quite lonely there amongst the other students, the interns, because they only wanted to hang out with other Dutch people or with the Dutch Marines and just do Dutch things.
yeah,
And it was just, I felt so lonely. I was like, I went there because I love scuba diving. I was already started scuba diving,
hmm.
and that gave me such a good feeling. And that's something that became really important to me. That was always my plan B.
It's interesting.
Uh,
One thing you said that's really interesting is so Aruba is a fairly hot tourist destination
hmm,
for Americans specifically, exotic
yeah,
tourist destination.
yeah,
And here you are, 20 going on 21, I think you said, and you're like on this party island basically, and you're bored and lonely when everyone else that's around the same demographic, all they want to do is drink and party basically and just
I
hang
know.
out. And
Yeah.
so that's interesting I think that was maybe, like you said, you at the time, not only you had interest in scuba diving also, but I think that was probably a pivotal point of your life
For
also,
sure.
where you were starting to really realize about what truly mattered to you, what your
Mm,
interests were. And I think that was around the time that, if I remember correctly from your bio, is that when you were starting to realizing that you were starting to have an obesity problem because you were binge eating also.
yeah.
And I think that was probably a contributing factor as well, to maybe your behavior, well, largely probably to your behavior too, because
Mm,
like you said, the cookie jar is the quickest access. You dip into it so many times and you say, nah, that's okay. I'm just having a snack, right? But then after some period of time, you realize, no, this is really binge eating. And it's driven through the emotions, the feelings, the
yeah.
fears, the uncertainties, the
Mm,
voice that you have. And
yeah.
honestly, there's literally studies out there, and this isn't just in different cultures, but it's like in people in general, is just that people try to eat away their problems.
Yeah.
It's just mesmerizing of how that people try to eat away their problems. In fact, and I know this is because I think in part why the United States has such a high obesity rate is not only because fast food is so accessible, which is a huge, huge business in itself, but
Mm,
because a lot of people actually do eat away their problems. Because honestly, right now, especially with this pandemic, 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and they turn to food as a resort to basically give them some comfort.
yeah,
So when you were
exactly.
talking about like going to Aruba, it's really interesting because I mean, you were at an age where most people at that age are like, I'm on an exotic island, I should party away, I should have fun, but not you. You were taking interest into scuba diving, right?
Yeah, I had my first license. I took it when I was 19 because I'm a person, I'm always in the water. I'm not a person to stay in the beach or on the poolside. I'm in the water. That's what I do. I would even lie in the bathtub for hours on Saturday afternoon to annoy my parents and even put my head under water because it was so relaxing. So that did
Yeah,
something to me. It made me feel and deal with my feelings that I couldn't really on the dry. That's very interesting. But yeah, coming back to what you were just saying about
hmm,
comforting that the food was after I was, I think I never been as miserable as I was then. I was
really,
so unhappy. And I realized how unhappy I was. I was completely stuck. I was living with girls. They were lovely girls, but I found out I'm just too sensitive. I know now I'm a highly sensitive person, and sometimes I need some space. But
yeah,
they were just always together, and they wanted to do everything together. And I'm actually known as a person that many people like, get along with everybody. And I just hated myself that I didn't want them around me.
yeah,
And so all the time I was rejecting my own feelings, rejecting. And they asked me, why don't you want to do that with us? Because I don't want to do the same stuff every Sunday, every Monday. I just hate doing the same shit all over the time, you
yeah,
know? So everything was in discussion because we shared two cars with the four of us. They wanted to be on the beach every Sunday, the three of them with all the boys. Fine. I would take the other car, go scuba diving, and took many
yeah,
licenses. And it was just that was the only day that was just my best day of the week. I also liked my internship. That was great. Everybody loved me. There was multicultural things. There were no Dutch people. I was invited
yeah,
to go to all the, I'm still in touch with people from that beach resort. It's Manchego Beach, it still exists. It was lovely. So in that way my life was good. But after when I had to go home, I felt terrible and I felt like an alien. I felt just so it was felt so shallow and so unimportant, and I
hmm,
felt I'm not here. Okay, I like to have fun and like to go out, but I'm not here. This can't be all there is. It's just
yeah,
not. It's
yeah,
just not okay. But I didn't know what because I couldn't feel really because I was afraid for my feelings. So the cookie jar changed to a daily um, cup of Ben and Jerry's cookie dough. Back
that's good
then,
ice
I
cream
also
though.
didn't know I'm massively lactose intolerant. So I would actually make myself not even fat, but also depressed and miserable and grumpy. I would
Oh,
have so much pain every day in my body. And I
yeah,
went to the doctor from when I was 15, but they would never diagnose anybody in that time in the Netherlands with a lactose intolerance, not even
really,
considering that my bloodline, my genetics come from the Asian side where most people are.
Yeah.
you know?
That's crazy.
So
So,
that made it worse. It made it
yeah.
worse. I was addicted to stuff that I can't even digest. It's just,
You
it's
know, it's
horrible.
so crazy that you say this, how we as human beings actually self-sabotage ourselves and make
Oh,
ourselves
yeah,
miserable. In
yeah.
fact, there's a lot of when you were talking about eating, being an Eastern European, I grew up on basically eating 5 course meals 5 times per day. It was
Mm,
just like, just eat, eat. You're hungry, eat. It's like you might be, you ate an hour ago, but are you hungry? Eat, 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 eat.
mm,
It was constantly eating because that's how I grew up. Not to mention as, sitting at the dinner table for 6 hours after dinner's over, because you're still sitting there munching and drinking, because that's the kind of family that I grew up in. And then
yeah.
when I moved to the US, like it was just it was a rude awakening for me, because suddenly I was like, no, it's not normal to eat as often. But I was
Mm-hmm,
taught, to do that. But then I
mm-hmm,
realized how big of a factor that also had in my life. And,
yeah.
it wasn't just life, but everything, that I did, relationships and business and I, in fact, I struggle. This is why personally I've struggled with health and fitness for a long time.
Mm,
I think over the last probably 2 to 3 years is when I really said, enough is enough. Being a former smoker, I mean, I smoked for a period of 10 years until I was
mm,
26 years old. And
mm,
after quitting, so now it's been a while, obviously 15 years, close to 15 years since I quit. But I struggle with that, and develop binge eating also because of the cravings for
mm,
nicotine as a
yeah.
result of that. But and then up until 2 to 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? Just because I grew up in an environment that didn't teach me how to take better care of myself and build good habits doesn't mean that I can't do it. So it was a mind shift,
Mm.
which is where I'm going with this. Is you were miserable. You were eating and you were massively lactose intolerant, but what I'm curious in knowing is, because I think this is key for people, is how did you realize that, all right, I'm miserable, I have an obesity problem, I'm not happy, I'm eating like crazy. What do I do from here? Like, did you have an epiphany that really was a rude awakening for you?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
I'm curious in knowing what happened,
definitely.
because that's a huge pivotal point in
Oh,
your life, right?
it was, yeah. I have a special person to thank for that. She was the person, Femke. She's a Dutch lady, but she lives in Aruba. And
Uh-huh.
we had a local person checking on all the interns. So she would actually be sort of the teacher there that came and check in.
Yeah.
And I was just, you know, I was lost. So I was so upset. I was so anxious. And she taught me the biggest lesson in my life, because I was sitting there just 3 months before, 4 months before the year was over, and all my friends and family and my former boyfriend already came to visit and they left, and then I was even more miserable and started eating, eating, eating. So I
Right.
started gaining way more. Like the first 6 months, maybe 2, 3 kilos on top of the, let's say, at least, yeah, at least 10 to 12 too much.
Yeah.
So it was just a little bit getting just a little bit more chubby than I was, but it was still okay. And
Yeah.
I just got so fat. But I didn't know that yet because we didn't have a mirror, and I didn't really get the hints. But I was just sitting there. And if people want to hear the full story, I'd say I made 2 podcast episodes about this because it's a long story. But
Yeah.
she put it in my face. She put the mirror up, not saying you're fat, but she says, you're here and you are playing a victim. You are playing a victim. You came here yourself. You choose to live with these girls. You choose to do this. You choose to do this. You choose this. And actually, you're a really strong, capable, smart, nice, talented person.
Yeah.
And the only reason you feel like this is because you are doing it to yourself. So either you find a way to move out, You find a way to have money to live on your own, or you suck it up and you make the best out of it. Batch. That's how it felt. But
You know what's really
obviously, she only
interesting?
told me that because I
Mhm.
would take it.
Yeah,
I respect her so much. I thanked her so
yeah.
many times for it. It's like, okay, true.
You know what's really interesting about what you said is, so as human beings, we like to hear what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. So when you were told,
Mm,
this person basically told you is, here's the mirror. Do you like what you see? She was telling you something that you didn't want to hear, that you didn't want to see, because that's a
no.
fear that people have. And then the other thing is making you realize that, Birgit, you have a choice and you're
Hmm.
making terrible choices. But
I made these
sometimes,
choices because I knew in my heart it wasn't the right choice to live with these
right,
girls and to go there with. I knew that already. I could
right,
feel that, but I ignored my feelings because I wasn't good with my feelings. I knew it,
yes,
and I didn't
exactly,
listen. That was it.
exactly. No, you're 100% correct. And the
Yeah.
reason I wanted to elaborate upon that is because I was one of those people that I always knew deep in my heart that I had more, I was worth more, I deserve more. But being influenced by the externals or eating away problems or saying, nah, I'm not gonna go to the gym
Mm.
today, or like doing things that like I would at the end of the day, and at the end of the day would be like, what the fuck, Ivan? Like, this isn't you. Why are you doing this to yourself? Like you said, you were eating ice cream, massively
You're like,
lactose intolerant,
yeah,
right? And like purposely
not knowing,
self
but
sabotaging yourself.
just
That's,
couldn't stop. I couldn't
mhm,
stop.
yeah,
Every day after I ate that bunch of shit and tried to hide it,
yeah.
even lied to myself about it, I said, never again. Next day, not even 24 hours later, I feel myself as being like, it's like a program running you, and you
Right.
decide to let it enter yourself because you don't know how to keep it out, and you're just a slave
Yeah.
of the addiction. And again, you drive to the supermarket. You had these big American supermarkets there and big portions and stuff. It's
Oh
very
yeah.
American for European people, Aruba.
Yep.
And you just do it over again, and you hate yourself, and that hatred makes it worse, and that's why you keep doing it, because you don't know how to deal with those feelings. So yeah, it took me a long time to really get out of that, but it's just too much to talk about. I think, but I can
Yeah.
definitely
No.
recommend people to listen to my stories if they want on my podcast. So
Yeah.
because if it's something that people really want to know more of, that's why I tell the stories and it's more detailed. Then
Yeah.
yeah, this
Yeah.
is just a hook, because I think there's much more to talk about, because this is this is just the beginning of the crap, obviously.
Absolutely. Well, I want to shift the conversation towards the fear, because
Hmm.
that's a really big one.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people say the fear is self-induced, and I believe that. I think it is self-induced. But what I'm curious in knowing is, obviously you had a lot of fears and a lot of things that you were doing to yourself, but you didn't really know how to overcome those fears. I
Hmm.
think one thing that I'm curious in hearing is so you weren't always gravitated towards scuba diving because it was a fear of yours, right? And
Hmm. Not
or
really.
wasn't it? No.
No, no.
Okay. So I remember in your bio, I think it said that in part of overcoming fear was scuba diving was one, and then the other one was really stepping outside of your comfort zone, right, of what you've traditionally done. So I'm curious in hearing about your mental take and the actions that you took to
Hmm.
overcome those fears. I mean, did you just wake up one day and say, said, what, enough is enough? How did you go about like handling, I mean, the binge eating, the
Hmm.
how you felt emotionally, inside yourself? How did you overcome those things? I mean, because you had to take action against
I
these
did.
things.
Yeah. So just to sketch you a timeline, when I came back from Aruba, I was so fat that my family and friends waiting for me on the airport didn't even recognize me. Okay, that happened, and I
That's
couldn't fit into any of
crazy.
my clothes. The
Yeah.
good thing is, because I actually got obese and I never was before, I qualified for an obesity program from the local hospital in the place where my parents live. So
Hmm.
I literally went back living with my parents for 6 months to lose all the weight. On top of that, to talk to a shrink, to do the exercise programs, and then I became that sporty person again that I was as a child. Because as a kid, I was slim, I was super sporty, I was really strong, but I just lost myself. And because I was talking to the shrink as well, at least you kind of start dealing with your feelings and you understand what's going on a very basic level, not too deep, but it started opening me up.
Yep.
And I kept going back to several strings with several problems in my early 20s. So I was doing okay. I lost the weight. I kind of kept it off. Sometimes gained a little bit, went
Yeah.
down. Now I'm even with COVID measurements, I'm even more slim than when I first lost the weight because the addiction stayed. So I still had to fight with the addiction for over 10 years. But now actually I can say that I lost it. But people say you can never lose the addiction, but you can. You just shouldn't listen to what everybody says.
Well, you
But then I
change. Yeah. You change your actions. I mean, addictions can be changed, right?
They can be changed and they can also be removed from
Hmm.
your system, but that's more of an energetic thing. But too much to talk about that
Sure.
now. But what did I do? I did that, and then I went to Austria for 6 months to run a ski hotel. Then I came back, and then I found a job in Amsterdam, and that's when I moved there. And actually was doing a lot better, but every
Hmm.
winter I would go massively down. If the sun would disappear and the cold dark days came, life got really tough for me,
Yeah.
and it was still a roller coaster. So I realized, okay, I'm not going to live like this. I wasn't
Right.
really depressed, but I was looking into the black hole,
Yeah.
but staying on the right side. But I knew something wasn't okay, and I felt I'm not going to live like this. And I'm way too positive and way too strong, and I'm actually a person that has is more courageous than most people. So that's probably why I just need to get help. So I went to my general doctor and said, hey, look, I'm not super depressed. I can laugh and smile and enjoy things every day, but it's
Yeah.
not normal, in my opinion, that when fall is here, that I'm
Right.
going to go downhill and then I come back up in the end of March. I don't want to live like that. And then actually I went back to a shrink and he helped me really well. And then I finally got to look at the pain. And then I remember the moment when I closed myself up.
Yeah.
And then I had to go through, and a lot of things that I suppressed, they came back up. And I had to go through all that. And it was really tough. And I was really upset. And it was really heavy stuff.
Hmm.
And that finally started opening me up. And I also went to Thailand to shut my mouth and do a couple years later and do a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat.
Okay.
So that was kind of the real turning point for me to really start feeling and dealing with my problems in another way. But the shit train went on because if you are closed off for so
Yeah.
long, still don't really, mostly you're still in your head. And when you are in your head, you are very easy to manipulate. People can lie to you, people can
Yeah.
take advantage of you because people can lie to you. And if you're in your
Yeah.
mind energy, you won't know that. But if you don't know,
Yes.
still don't know that you have to be in the energy of your heart, and then you feel somebody else's energy, that's the only way to know that people are taking advantage of you or lie to you or treat you bad. And that's
Yeah.
still something that comes back. And yeah, I
If
went in.
you can't learn to respect yourself, others won't, for sure, because like you said, they're going to recognize your weak points, and it's so saddening on how
Mm,
other people will pry on your weaknesses because
Yes.
they know that that can be advantageous. I think there's some aspect, and this is probably a completely different conversation, but there's some aspect of that also in business,
Mm.
where when you think about it, is just there's strengths and weaknesses, but at the core, you can't. And I will even go as far as saying that if you don't value yourself, you can't ask others to value, or they'll
No.
value you, I should say, because they recognize
Mm.
that you're not valuing yourself and they see that as a weakness. And it's
Yeah.
so saddening that that there's human beings out there that literally do that, that will pry on people who have weaknesses, as opposed to try to support and encourage them and uplift them to where they can become a better version of themselves, which I'm a
Mm.
huge fan of. Is anybody who support, because let's face it, there's a lot of people who pry on other people's weaknesses, but there's only a few people out there who will try to actually uplift and encourage you and support you and say, you know what, I'm here. If you need someone to talk to, if you just want to let something off your chest, or you need some perspective, it's completely non-biased. Like,
Mm.
there's literally a shortage
Yeah.
of those kinds of people in the world who are just so open-minded and optimistic. And but I think you were making strides, and I think the reason your life changed is because you decided that enough was enough and you needed to take action. Like you said, you went to Thailand and you did meditation, all of this. But I think, I could be wrong here, but I think that it took some time to figure out what you needed to do to change
Mm.
your life, because there isn't like this
Yeah.
magic button that says change my life and you're going to do
Mm.
this and suddenly you're going to feel better.
No. No. Exactly. Exactly. I knew something wasn't right, so I went out of hotel management, and I accidentally ended up in recruitment, worked as a headhunter for a couple of companies, also studied 1 year between in Barcelona.
Hmm.
Then I moved to London to set up a desk of the last headhunter job I ever had. But I already felt like, okay, this is going to be my last one. I'm going to smash it.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, my father already was diagnosed with blood cancer, multiple myeloma. Now the clock is ticking. So that kind
Hmm.
of keeps you a bit closer to home. But he was always really supportive. Okay, go to London, go to Barcelona. And he was so proud. And then I came back to Amsterdam after being away for 1.5 years, and we're opening the office here. And I started with a big success, and I was doing really well. And I learned a lot of lessons, so I was actually really strong, and I was good in business, and people couldn't really pry on me anymore. I thought, I thought, but hey, as long as you don't really learn your lesson, you learn one and then you forget the other because you swap them around, you
Right.
don't integrate things, the lesson is going to come back to you. So I found myself from being this person that was really good in recruitment. I was actually known for my big mouth, but mostly I made it happen. I said I
Right.
can do this and this and this, and I did it. And then I went to study for a year, and this all pain and this stuff, the things that I let other people do to me, treat me really bad and stuff, it was still going on. It took me so long to really let go of that. So the year of
Yeah.
studying was good, but it actually made me flip a little bit more to the humble side, because you open up. And the
Right.
thing is, when you're closed off so long and you're really like hardcore person, and you keep your mask on and sometimes you take it off, then
Right.
you're out of balance. So at that time I was a bit too humble, and also the way the process went. And I said, okay, for once, maybe I should just shut up, listen. This company really seems to have it figured out. And in a way they have, because I learned a lot there, but not all the lessons that I thought. I
Sure.
actually I actually knew a lot more than I believed. And because of that, and I thought, okay, I'm really going to learn something here.
Yeah.
The thing that I actually learned is that if I give my power to others, and if I am not a person to be obedient, I'm not a person that people tell what to do, but I kind of say, okay, let me just listen and learn.
Right.
And you actually When it's too late, find out that you've been actually not treated fairly. They're trying to fire me, but I'm a very smart person with contracts because I'm in recruitment for so long. So it was quite
Yeah.
hard. And it was actually fighting that off. Like any Dutch person would say, hey, if they treat you like that, why don't you just go away? And I say, no, I'm not going to go away. I almost believe I wasn't good enough. And that was my mistake. I am not the victim here. Lesson learned 10 years
Yeah.
ago. This happens to me because I'm letting it happen. And apparently,
Right.
they have a very, very different view of me. You're such a nice girl, but I don't think you can do sales and close deals. I think I closed about 50 deals in my life before I came here, but I was so flabbergasted because
Yeah.
I had such different feedback all of my life because I was known as a killer. And I was like, oh, maybe they're right. And I almost believed it, almost,
Right.
when it's almost too late. And then I flipped it. And then the year after, I was in the top 25 worldwide, and I was the top biller on the perm desk. And I opened so many accounts. The company is still doing very well, but I worked there for many years, but it wasn't
Yeah.
easy. But I stayed there almost for 5 years.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I was always doing my dive mask. I had my scuba things. It was always a plan B because I felt inside one day, if I'm fed up and I don't know what I want to do, if I have professional scuba licenses, I can go abroad and work in
Yeah.
scuba. Bye bye. And then I'll figure out what I'm going to do. It was always a bit of a joke, but I ended up doing that. So I was never afraid of the scuba. For me, underwater is easy. I was afraid of letting go of the people think I am a woman, so I should shut up. I am supposed to get children and kids and marry, be happy, boxed up in my house, work for the mortgage.
Yeah.
That was my problem. And every time I would think about these things and then trying to behave normal, what you see on TV, society, blah,
Right.
blah, how you should behave, that was the problem. But to step out
Yes.
of that, that's the scary part. And
Right.
that's where I became the expert in. And that's what I help people do. I'm not saying anybody to quit their jobs or whatever. Most people just want to have more confidence, or they have the 30s dilemma, or they are in midlife crisis or whatever, and they're just afraid to really go out there. But I lost my father in 2016. I
Mm-hmm.
stayed there for almost 2 years to recover. And then I said, hey, I want to do my sabbatical. I never went to Australia for 3 months to backpack. I want to do it then. And they knew if they were saying no,
Yeah.
I would just quit and go. So they say,
Right.
okay, but you can come back. And I took unpaid leave. And for me, it was already a little bit of a test if I really wanted to stay because something inside told me not. I was not in a good place
Right.
after my father died and was struggling and all these old fears like, oh, do I really want it? I feel so locked up. I feel so the restlessness. But
Yeah.
admitting that, and like anybody would tell you that you're crazy, you shouldn't do that because it's risky. Like no one would say, oh yeah, no, quit your job, do whatever you want. No, they say, no, you can't do that, especially my parents. Lucky for me, one
Yeah.
parent was not there to stop me. So you only have one.
Right.
So
Well, I want to go
yeah.
back to you mentioned some things that I think are really important to highlight is when you were working at that company is that
Mm-hmm.
and this is I think people think this is fundamental on the way that they should live their lives and even operate their businesses is that they seek validation from others. They think that if you get validation and approval from others, that you're good enough, that you're capable enough, that you're smart enough, that you're good looking enough, that you're fit enough. I mean, anything really to
Mm-hmm.
satisfy
Yeah.
whatever void that you have, that's going to give you some
Mm-hmm.
comfort. And that
Mm-hmm.
is completely false because the only person that needs to understand that you're capable, that you're strong enough, that you're smart enough, that you're attractive enough, whatever void is yourself. But people don't have the confidence. They can't develop the confidence to understand that. Because in what you were just saying
Yeah.
is, and this is really for anyone, this is for any human being. And what's really key about this and what you were talking about it is that this is literally how people build powerful businesses and brands, is because they have the confidence, they have the self-belief. They don't worry about, and in reality, believe it or not, there's so much that you can control. You can control everything in your life, everything. It's a matter of choice. It's a matter of choice. But a lot of people don't make smart choices. They make bad choices because they're influenced by the externals, by what the world and society tells them.
Or they don't choose.
Or they
They
don't
don't
choose.
choose. That was my
Exactly.
lesson. Mostly.
Yeah, you didn't choose because you were
Because
so...
I didn't choose. They were choosing for me.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
they
You were
chose to
giving up
fire
your...
me.
Mhm.
Until
you
I
were
chose
giving
they
up
weren't going
your...
to.
You were giving up your power. You were
I
giving
did.
up your
I gave
power.
it
You were giving
away.
up the power that you have, and as a result, they took that power and used it against you.
They did. They did. And it was the hell of a fight. It was the hardest thing I had to
Yep.
do. It's also
Yep.
my podcast, 2 episodes. So, and then my new season, 1 more. That was, if you give your power away, or if you don't dare to choose, some for you.
Yep.
And yes, you can control things, and in the end, you can control shit. But the thing is, life is life. But the only thing you can control or can stop is that other people control you. You drive, but you don't always know where the road is going. That you can control, but you can control how you are driving. That's the thing that I
What's
wanted
really
to.
crazy about control and power is that a lot of people are actually afraid to exercise it because they're afraid to be the lonely wolf. And honestly, I will tell you this, looking at it from a business standpoint is, like the Jeff Bezos of the world or Elon Musk of the world, right? These are like, self-made billionaires, or Richard Branson, even amongst few, right? And these are people that are very, very early age understood what power and control and authority and confidence means and what you can do with these things. Now, in reality, deep inside, there are lonely wolves, even though they've created mass exposure in the world, which always wasn't the case because, and there's probably a different kind of evolution. You go through different stages on the way people see you. At first people, deny you, then they hate you, then they're fans of you, and then they support you. They're your biggest fan. They're your biggest friend suddenly, right?
Like Gandhi said.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know
exactly.
that saying. Yeah, that was what I
Exactly.
used for my situation back then.
Right, because, and when you took back your power and when you took control, this is for viewers and listeners, that you changed the trajectory of your life.
Exactly.
That was the difference, is because everyone has the power to change their life. But the big question is, are you willing to do what it takes to change your life?
Yeah.
Are you willing to take the actions? Are you willing to overcome the fears? Are you willing to go above and beyond? Are you willing to do, as I say, the 1% of what the other 99% are unwilling to do?
Exactly.
That's the world and society, really. I mean, our world and society is mediocre when you think about it, because so many people think that they're conditioned to live in a certain way.
Yeah.
And if they don't live a certain way, they think that, oh shit, someone told me I'm not smart enough. Maybe I really aren't. I mean, like, I look at someone like me who barely graduated high school, dropped out of college, and I made more money than people that have higher degrees than me because I learned everything I know from the School of Hard Knocks, which is the best education I think you can get, by the way, is the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah. And you are less, the good thing is about not having so much education that you learn to think for yourself and choose for yourself.
Right.
Netherlands in general has a high educated population, but people are more like sheep here. They seem liberal, but they're actually quite neat and they follow the rules and stuff.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're very nice people, great
Sure.
people, but actually everybody is too freaking busy for the things that really matter. I hated it that I had to book an appointment with my friends two months before. I'm not going to live that way. I don't know right now if I feel like it in 2 months. So if you want to see me, do something about it. Make a priority. You like to see me, then we can make an appointment for 2 weeks from now or a couple of days, because I understand you have kids and everything. 2 months up front. I feel really depressed that I have to make an appointment with my best friends 2 months in ahead. I don't want to do that. And then actually, you are right. Let's now meet every Wednesday. When I was in the country, we would say, okay, the fourth Wednesday of the month, every month, at least.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. People don't realize that. And what you were just saying before, Ivan, I couldn't have said it any better way, but I say that all the time. The conditioning and the pressure of society and the things. My fear wasn't scuba going on the water. I mean, I do that with my eyes closed without a mask. I don't care.
Sure.
But the fear of stepping out of that system, like, oh, I don't have a fixed job anymore. Oh, I'm leaving everything behind. Oh, what about my house? What about this? Will I ever find a husband? Will I ever have a kid? Oh, maybe not. Do I want that? I don't know. What do I want? No freaking clue. But I came back from my world trip of travels in Australia, and it was great. 3 months living out of a backpack. I also took my open water scuba instructor license in Brisbane. So that was my plan. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be off work for 3 months. I'm going to do that. But it was already 7 years since my dive master, so I was a bit rusty on some of the things and the teaching. I did some in the Netherlands as well. So that was really a challenge, but I passed, and it was really cool. So I had that in my pocket. And then I came back, and after 2 months, I felt so bored, but so stressed at the same time being back in that office. And I came back, and so many new people, and I was one of the most senior women in the company. And, I had a freaking story from almost being fired to being on the top 3 boards everywhere, so everybody knew my name, and it was just crazy. And then it's like, and I already said, hey, I'm not really feeling it anymore in this new desk, and I'm doing all this stuff like admin systems, and I just had everything in order on my last desk, because I did that so I could make a better business. But now I'm back to the drawing board for the 4th desk I'm building in my life. I'm so bored, and I'm not proud of this. I don't want to do this. And I already gave him away and then he's like, okay, I'm going to look for something else. And it's like, I need something fulfilling, more challenging.
Sure.
But if as a headhunter, most jobs are on the phone if you're not in the management team. And then if you go in the management team, you're only going to look at spreadsheets and KPIs.
That's true.
That's not why I want to wake up in the morning. I don't give a shit about that. Really, I don't. And then most time I have to spend time speaking to people that are completely stupid in my opinion. What the fuck are you talking about? Sorry for my language. But most of the time I would sit in a room and I would listen to people blah, 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 blah. And then I would just take the angle out and say one thing. And then everybody's like, shit, she's right. What a fucking waste of my time. The whole hour yapping about nothing.
It is.
We didn't have much meetings, but I just know it, especially what I went through with that company. I know it when you're shitting in my face and you don't agree with what you're telling me. I know. I know. So. No,
that is so true. That is so true.
Some people were very afraid of me, especially the senior guys.
And honestly, I mean, in respect of time, is I know we could continue the conversation. There's so much that I think we unpacked, that we talked about. First of all, I want to say, congratulations on realizing how much power and control that you actually have as a human being, and taking the steps to change your life. In the way that you have always wanted to, but never actually pursued to do so. But before we sign off and we wrap up the episode, throw out some social handles websites? How can people connect with you for
Yeah,
a conversation?
that's a really good one. I always have to look up look up the website for my podcast for my subscribe page. But
Sure.
let's start on the easy stuff. My Instagram and my Facebook handle are at Cheering with Birgit, as you can also see here in my name and on
Hmm.
the call in the video. If you find me there, I will give more links. I am
Sure.
working on my permanent website, but it will be birgityegülalp.com.
Okay.
Thing is, you have to know how to write my name without the dots and the U. Right now, it's actually the same, but it says shop.birgitjegülalp.com. That's my
Okay.
temporary subdomain. So they can find me there. And for my podcast, it's available on a lot of different pages, but let me look up the URL because I'm
Yeah, sure. So on social media, sounds like will be the easiest to connect with you.
yeah,
And I'll definitely add that into the caption of the episode as well.
yeah,
And
that's cool.
you'll
I
be
found
tagged
it.
everywhere. I know it can be difficult for people to reach out. Obviously, when
Yeah.
trying to spell your name or
Hmm.
so. But I want to thank you for coming on. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. It just I didn't even come up with half, but I knew that was gonna happen if because you took it
Sure,
so far back to my childhood. But in a way, most people
sure,
only ask about what I'm doing now. And we didn't talk much about that, but that's something for people to discover. But you ask a lot
absolutely.
where I came from. So thank you so much for your sincere interest and